Life will teach us what it wants us to know on its own timeline. And the sooner we make peace with that the reality, the sooner we really start learning the important things.
When we go through one of these hard chapters, there's no going back to whatever was before.
If you really want to be curious, underneath, you have to be self-compassionate. You don't get to be curious if you're an expert who has to do things. This comes back a little bit to the present over perfect idea. If you have to do it perfect all the time, you're going to miss some really important things.
It's easy to forget as the reader, right? You can easily think, oh, I know this person because they've told me this story, but we're getting a crafted version of that story. This is episode 268 of the Brilliant Balance podcast, and I am thrilled to bring you my interview with Shauna Niequist. Shauna is an incredible writer who I discovered for the first time maybe a decade ago when I read her book, Bread and Wine. And I found this book to be like a love letter to the gifts of hospitality and simple pleasures. And it was just captivating and also relatable because Shauna and I share a deep love for bringing people together and feeding them. In fact, she says that the alternate title to her memoir could have been There Will Be Snacks. And I so get that. Later, I read her book, Present Over Perfect, and I just cherished every word of that book. It found me at exactly the right time. And I heard her do an interview, a Super Soul interview with Oprah when that book launched. And there's something about the way Shauna uses words, both her written word and also the spoken word that just really speaks directly to my heart. So I have been wanting to have Shauna on this podcast for a long time. And it was such a treat to sit down and have this conversation with her. This particular conversation follows the launch of her most recent book, which is called I Guess I Haven't Learned That Yet. Isn't that a great title? And this is a really tender memoir of a difficult chapter in life in which she is learning to be patient and curious and resilient in the face of difficulty. Shauna is wise, she is funny, she is warm, and it was just a real treat to be able to sit down and talk with her. And I am so delighted to be able to share this interview with you. Shauna is someone who really has learned and who reminds us that the truly abundant life isn't one that is gained by striving or by winning or by all of those external markers of success, but rather it's by mustering up enough courage to forge ahead when our lives are falling apart. And she really brings some of the tools and ideas that I think we need in order to build resilience in this era that so many of us are living through. So Shauna just has this energy and she sort of lives in wonder and imagination and creativity. And if that's not the good life, then I don't know what is. So here, without further ado, is my interview with Shauna Niequist. The one thing that I wish were happening about this interview in real life is I wish we could sit down together and have some kind of a snack, because I know that you and I share like this gift of hospitality. So I want you to tell me, if I had the benefit of being in your house, what would you be pulling out today?
Well, I'll tell you two different things. I'll tell you what I ate for breakfast, but then I'll tell you what I would make if you were coming over and we didn't know each other that well. If we knew each other, if you were my neighbor, I would have you over. I am still eating Thanksgiving leftovers very happily. So I am doing stuffing warmed in a frying pan with 2 fried eggs on top. And it is my favorite thing. So if you were my neighbor and you were coming over for coffee and breakfast, I would make you a big plate of that. But if we were just getting to know each other and, it's like 11 a.m., I would do probably like just like a tiny little snack plate. Apples, cheese, cashews, maybe some crackers, maybe like a mustard or a jam, a couple tomatoes, something like that. Just like little snacky something. And then maybe hot tea. It's really cold here today. So some hot tea
Mm-hmm.
on a cloudy, cold day in New York. Yeah.
Now, are you a coffee drinker at first and then you switch to tea, or is it tea all day?
No, that's exactly right. I am a coffee first thing in the morning. Like, I think there's no greater luxury than someone else making the coffee. So on the days that I smell the coffee before I get out of bed, it means my husband got up before me and made the coffee. And I think that just makes me feel like
Mm.
the fanciest person alive. So I like one big cup of coffee, and then I switch to tea during the day. And I try not even tea, if I'm not careful about the caffeine, it'll keep me up a little bit. So by
Yes.
early afternoon, no more
Yes.
tea. Yeah.
All the herbals. But this is the thing, by this time of year, I have to have a warm beverage like all day. So
It's true.
if I don't switch to herbal tea, then it's not so good for my sleep.
That's
for
true.
sure.
Same.
I love it. Well, listen, I want to talk about all the books with you because I've read them all. I love them all. And I really want our listeners to kind of understand it as a body of work. But we are going to get toward your most recent work, which I think was truly exceptional. It's just such a delight to read your words. Like there are I read a lot. My listeners will know this. Like I love to read. I read really fast. I have a Kindle loaded up and I have a stack all the time on my nightstand. But your words are ones that I make myself slow down to savor because you're such a words girl. Like your ability to use words to just paint pictures and create emotion is like, it's so exceptional. And it's really an honor for me to get to tell you that, like looking at your face while I get to tell you that, because you don't always get to say that to people whose work you really respect and admire. So I want to know, like, when did you first know that you wanted to write? When did you know you had that gift? And what do you get out of the experience?
Well, I mean, first of all, what a compliment. Thank you so much. And that's a compliment in particular that really means a lot to me. I'm very much like a purist when it comes to being a creative person or a writer. The act of writing is something really enjoyable for me. It's not like I have these amazing ideas. I just have to get the content out there. It's like making the words fit together in a very particular way is a really joyful process for me. So that particular compliment really means a lot to me. And I would say, if my parents were here, they would say, we knew that she had to become a writer or something to do with words because of how much she read and how much she talked when she was little. I was an early reader and an early talker, and I'm just a words person in every way. And so reading makes you a better writer. It makes you pay attention to vocabulary and pacing and punctuation. And so I would say I was an early bookworm, and that sort of paved the way for me to be a communicator.
Yes, me too. I'm an only child, and I think they were like my friends. You know, I would sit with just for days on end with stacks of books. And I think that's where some of the speed comes from, the ability to just like want to get through the story. But I still have such nostalgia about those times in libraries and curled up in chairs, and just the words stay with you. You know, sometimes I can still go back to a phrase from a book that I read a really, really long time ago.
Oh,
and that
absolutely.
notion of
Yeah.
craftsmanship. Yeah. Yeah. And not all books are like that. Sometimes I just want a good, like, it's a rollick to read a fun story, but when they're crafted, there's something really special about that. So your parents have known for a long time. And when did
Yeah.
you give yourself permission to say, this is really part of who I am? This is what I'm going to do.
I was an English major, an English and French literature major. So mostly I was a reader. I wasn't taking a lot of the classes like in the composition or creative writing. I was a student of literature, and it didn't feel to me like a real job that real people got to have necessarily when I was in college. I would have loved it, but I think I had an awareness that I had a lot to learn. And so it wasn't till my later 20s, I was working full time in a totally different arena. But on weekends and at night, I was writing. I was writing essays. I was writing bits of fiction. I was trying to figure out what kind of writer I wanted to be. And then I was invited to write for a project outside of my regular job. Took tons and tons of work. I really enjoyed it. It forced me to sharpen up my skills in all these new ways. And then the project went absolutely nowhere. Like one day they called me and they were like, oh yeah, all this work you've done, all this writing we've done, we're never using that. None of it. Like we're not doing that project. And I was so heartbroken. And then an editor called me and said, I heard you're a writer and I want to see your stuff. And I'm really grateful for that first project because it got me ready. It got me working as a writer so that then when I got an amazing opportunity, I wasn't like, oh, sure, let me figure this out. I was like, yes, I've got some stuff. I've got some good habits. I've got some good practices. So that kind of late, yeah, it was, but like late 20s was when I really started to kind of hone those skills in a useful way.
Yeah. And you have found your way to a genre that seems to suit you so well. And how would you describe it? The type of writing that you do, the type of books that you create?
So I always call them essay collections, but people in publishing and marketing never want you to, it's like they think that like as soon as you use the word essay, people like snooze. They just like immediately fall asleep. So apparently essay is like not a cool word to use in publishing, but it's narrative nonfiction. It's not, I don't necessarily think of myself as a memoirist. But not for any real reason. I tend to say I write essay collections gathered together on one particular theme. This one is about this. This one is about this. I really like that short format. Yeah. Essay tends to be shorter than chapter and tends to be nonlinear or non-chronological. And again, that you're exactly right. It's a funny little format that just suits me really well. They're between 1,200 and 3,000 words. They're a couple pages. There's a couple different ways they start and a couple different ways they end, and they just happen to work well for me. I'm really grateful to get to work in this format.
Yes. And it's so digestible. But then the point when I was making before about wanting to savor them, like you can sort of walk away from one and think about it. Similar to like, I think a blog post, like a well-constructed blog post, that length is like very digestible. Which again, for my listeners who are almost always like really busy working moms, that's helpful. Because sitting down to get through an entire book that has a theme from beginning to end can be daunting. And I think there's something just really delicious about those sort of, it's like a snackable book, the same way we were talking about, that little snack plate. It feels like that in book form, maybe, which I like.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about the book Present Over Perfect. It found me at exactly the right time, right? We're very similar age. And I think as you were probably writing it, I was probably living a lot of the same lessons. What does that term mean to you? Why was it so important?
Well, I was actually just thinking about this morning because later this week, I'm going to speak at an event, and it's a Christmas event. And so they were like, like whatever Christmassy thing you want to talk about. And so I was like, what should I talk about? And I remembered that present over perfect is a phrase that I wrote for the first time just about this time of year, probably 2014. The book came out in 2016, but I'm imagining, I know it didn't. So, but it was a Christmas related crisis that forced me to find those words. I had a newborn at home and a 5-year-old, and I had a crazy work schedule. And Christmas, is one of those times where the invitations, most of them are so lovely and you want to do them all. And there's all this stuff on the calendar. Then there's stuff that you want to do in your own home. There's stuff you want to do with your old friends and your new friends and for your kids. And it's like 10 Decembers worth of things packed into one. And I remember thinking, yes, I'm not going to go through another Christmas season and miss it again. I'm not going to be so committed to my to-do list and my task list and my baking list and my shopping list that I get to another one and realize I missed it. Like I did it all, but like my insides missed it. My heart missed it. I went through it like a high-speed chase, right? Not like something to savor or learn about or treasure. And so I wrote that phrase, present over perfect, because I was in my own Christmas scheduling crisis. And it obviously it was the words I needed, but I think it captured the words that a lot of us need, not just for that season, but as a way of living and a way of kind of organizing our time and our commitments.
Yeah. And it's like, the perfect part of it implies performance. Like it's for someone else to evaluate, was this good enough? And the present part to me, what was so resonant about that is am I actually having this experience from the inside out? Like not what does it look like from the outside in, but what does it feel like from the inside out? And that those, again, kind of dropping in for those moments, even in the midst of the chaos, feels like it's accessible, but especially important at this time of year. So I love that we're getting to have this conversation sort of rooted in this season. I really want, when you're listening to this, I want you all to think about which of these books that we're talking about resonates the most with you and start there. I don't know that there is a particular starting place in Shauna's body of work that you have to start with. But if you're in a season of life where you feel like, man, I am just running all the time and I'm missing stuff, Present Over Perfect would be my recommended starting point for you. It's just an exceptional piece.
Thank you.
The next one I want to talk about is Bittersweet. And when I read Bittersweet, I'll admit I had not been through as many hard things as I would say I've been through now. So when I hit that season in my own life, I was really grateful. I went back to your words to carry me through some of that season, because I think we typically just want those hard seasons to be over with. Like we want to white knuckle our way through them and just let this be over. I want it behind me. But one of the things that you've learned is to find some beauty in allowing those seasons to unfold and teach the lessons that they have for us. And I want to talk a little bit about that with you. So because I think it leads into your latest book as well. But can you talk about what that looks like for you to let those seasons teach what they're there to teach?
Well, I mean, I think you're giving me a compliment I don't totally deserve. I don't think we have a choice, right? The seasons are going to teach us, and they're not usually going to let us go from the season till we learn what we have to learn in the season. And so if anyone could skip over hard seasons, if that was possible, I would do it in a heartbeat. That's my preference. But that's not how life is. And so life will teach us what it wants us to know on its own timeline. And the sooner we make peace with that, the reality, the sooner we really start learning the important things. But I would say there is also, to a certain extent, you can avoid a lot of those things, or you can't avoid going through them, but you can avoid talking about them. And I think one of the things I have felt over the course of my life is that joy and joyful experiences feel very shared and very contagious. Like when you get engaged, you're like, oh my gosh, there are engagement rings everywhere. Everybody's engaged. This is so fun. When you're pregnant and you've been like, trying for a long time, you're like, oh my gosh, baby stores everywhere. Everybody's doing this. When you're in a season of great heartache or pain or loss, you think you're the only person on earth who's feeling it. And you're just shocked that everyone else is walking around being so normal. Like, what are you just walking on the sidewalk? Like my heart is not broken. You're just driving in your car. Like I'm not about to throw up. Like you feel your pain so acutely and you feel so isolated by it. And so one of the things I've tried to do as a writer and as a storyteller is one of my greatest goals is to write as a friend and to help my friends or my readers feel less alone. And one of the places I feel most alone is in my pain. And so I had to write about that. I had to say, I'm probably not the only one who feels totally isolated by the things that are breaking her heart. So I'll tell you about what's breaking my heart these days in the hopes that it helps you feel, even if you're still heartbroken, a little bit less alone in that pain. That's really important to me.
Why do you think we're so bad at that? Because I agree with you. I think we share our joy from the mountaintops and we sort of retreat into ourselves when there is a hard season. What do you think that's about?
Well, I think there are a lot of things that go into it. One of them, I would say, is the idea of toxic positivity in our culture, the idea that the that it's wrong somehow to talk about the painful parts, almost like they're contagious, or like if we talk about them, they'll get bigger. We have to be afraid of them. We have to manage them and keep them small. Also, that idea that if you talk about the bad things, this is sort of the toxic positivity part. You're not acknowledging all the goodness in your life, right? I remember writing
like
in
you're
a
ungrateful.
I remember writing in a very vulnerable way about our struggle with infertility and multiple miscarriages. And I felt so fragile writing about it, but I felt like it was the right thing to do. And I believed in it. And the first person that commented said, "How dare you talk about this when you already have one healthy child at home?" And so what that person is saying is some people get to express pain and loss, but other people don't, based on what you perceive they have or don't have. So ostensibly, maybe this person was struggling with infertility and they did not have any children yet. And the fact that I had one felt like, nope, you don't get to complain about this. We call this sometimes like the suffering Olympics. Like, unless yours is the worst thing, then you can't complain about it. And I understand where those impulses come from. I've felt those things in my life, but I don't think they're the best parts of us. And I think the best parts of us get called out when we say, listen, your pain might be really different than mine, but there's space for it as well. But I think it's when we judge each other for it, we keep each other quiet, right? When you say, that's ungrateful, your thing isn't bad enough, your thing's not as bad as my thing, I would love having your thing instead of my thing. That's what keeps us private about our pain, is other people's judgments about it.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question. And when you had that experience directly of someone outwardly judging you to say, like, how dare you share this? It certainly doesn't encourage you to continue. So it's brave to say, I'm going to continue to tell my story. And because I think you do, there's a 360. You celebrate the highs and the lows. You can see it. Like, you're not only telling painful stories. There's no sort of like neediness in that. So there's a balance to what gets shared, that life has both, right? Which again is sort of, we were talking about the book Bittersweet. I think that's the point, is that it's the intertwinement of those two sets of emotions that make a complete life. Otherwise, we're sort of this like Stepford person that's not real. And yet we don't want to, I know, at least for me, I don't want to evoke pity. So part of my resistance to sharing something that's more vulnerable might just be like, I don't want you to feel sorry for me. Like, so what is the response that I want, I think can get in the way here as well, is it's compassion. It's, my motivation for sharing it might just be to be of service, but I don't want people to respond with like something that feels like pity. Does that resonate with you?
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's worth thinking through the concentric circles in which you share difficult things, right? Like, the great thing about book writing is you've got like a year and a lot of smart people helping you figure out what to keep in and what to take out. It's not like something terrible happens and I write it and goes to print that day. If it's made it into a book,
right,
my family knows about it. My therapist has spent a lot of time on it. My closest friends know about it. It's now, they talk about sharing from scars, not wounds. And I think that's an important thing too.
Yes.
If it's made it to a book, it has already become a scar. It's a part of my story, but it's not a gaping wound, because that would be too dangerous for me and for my readers, right? That's not fair. We don't actually have a relationship. So the people who get to tend to my wounds, right, in like real time, my husband, my closest friends, my mom, my therapist, not the internet or a reader holding a book in their hand. And I think that's an important way to think about it.
Do not allow the internet to tend to your wounds. That feels like a terrible idea. Right. Yeah. But I think it is so beautiful, the notion of like your core group. That's who the term tending to your wounds is a really beautiful phrase. Like, that those are the people who are privileged and close enough and you trust. And then there is an element of connection that can come from being a whole human who is real and has highs and lows. But that is that is crafted for an external audience. And I think it's an important reminder, Shauna, because it's easy to forget as the reader, right? You can easily think, oh, I know this person because they've told me this story, but we're getting a crafted version of that story for public consumption on purpose. And that matters. Yeah.
And I think there's a little bit of conversation like that, that's not authentic in some way. And I just think it's what's appropriate for the venue, right? There are varying levels of transparency that are appropriate for each different venue. And so there is, I'll never lie in a book. Never. I'll never lie on the internet. It's not like, if you follow my social media, you think I'm 6 feet tall and then you meet me and I'm 5'2", right? Like I'm not, I'm neither of those. I'm 5'6", it doesn't matter. But there are no lies. There's no misrepresentation. It's just the appropriate level of transparency for the appropriate venue. And that keeps me safe. It also keeps my readers safe. They should have a person to tell their secrets to, but it's not me. We don't know each other. So it's important for us to talk about those things and have a healthy perspective on them.
I love it. I love it. And it's a great transition to your latest book, which is called, I Guess I Haven't Learned That Yet. And what I loved about this book was that you talked about giving yourself permission to be a beginner, to embrace that beginner's mind of saying, I don't have everything figured out. And you describe it in the book as though that were a bit of a pivot, like that something had to shift in you to create space for that mindset. Can you talk about that shift?
I was in my mid 40s, which I think is for a lot of people in their careers is when they're getting to they're a little bit more of a senior staff member as opposed to like an intern. I'm a parent, I'm a mom. People think moms know everything, parents know everything. I was a person who lived in my hometown for a really long time. I had a deep sense of like, I was the person you could ask about the neighborhood or about when is the parade or I knew that kind of stuff, right? And then as a writer, the weirdest thing happens. You become a writer just because you're good at like putting together sentences, and people all of a sudden start to think that you're an expert in things. When something happens in culture, they're like, would you like to weigh in on this? You're like, oh, all I do is type. Why do you care what I think? No. But all of those things that go together over the years, without intending to, I had become one of those people who had answers, right? I remember a couple years before this, my editor asked me if I would go to an event. And I was like, yeah, tell me about it. She was like, well, there's just all these writers and they totally need like a mentor. Like they want someone to like show them the ropes and answer their questions and tell them how it is. I was like, yes, I totally want that. I can't wait for that event. She was like, Shauna, you're the mentor. I was like, oh my gosh. Like I kind of ended up being like an old writer without realizing it. I was several books in, and so I had slipped into this place where I think other people treated me as an expert, and so I started to think of myself that way. And then this whole season, so many of the things that I thought I knew kind of went out the window. And at first it felt really stressful, it felt really scary. I felt really lost. I felt a loss of identity and sense of history and location and story. And for quite a season, quite a while, I had to live sort of in the emptiness of that. Who am I? I don't know. Where do I come from? I don't know. Where do I belong? I don't know. Where am I going? I don't know. And little by little, the process of being a learner and a listener and a rookie and a person who's not afraid to ask for help, a person who's not afraid to try and get it wrong and start over, it was those skills that brought me from that old life and old identity into a new one. It was a very difficult, but very beautiful process.
Yeah. And that whole transition was centered in your move to New York City. Like a lot of this book is about this transition of your child, like the place you had lived your whole life in Michigan to, okay, now I am living in New York, completely new life. And I wonder what that did to accelerate this journey. Like the idea of being in a new place, how does it dovetail into this new mindset?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, so if we had moved, like we'd moved before from the suburbs to a little bit of a smaller town, back to the suburbs, all in the Midwest. I lived in California in college. I would say the move from the Midwest to California and from the Midwest to New York are the biggest because there's such big lifestyle changes. But I think that moving from the suburbs to the city was also a big part of it. Had we moved away from our hometown, but to another Midwestern suburban town, there would have been the same, like, we need to make friends, make new friends, but it wouldn't have been like, I don't know how to get my laundry done. I don't know how to get groceries. I don't know how to get my kids enrolled in school. The enormity of how many things were new because of the suburb to city thing was, I think, and because there was one day when, because of the story of New York, it's an important part of it. Right before we moved, actually, I was having a hard time getting like furniture delivered and I didn't really know where it was supposed to go. And I had all these things. I was like, I think there's like a rug sitting on the street somewhere. This is not working. And I was complaining to a friend and she said, listen, that's buggy. Like, that's terrible. I don't know where your rug is, but consider this. You are following in the footsteps of millions of people whose old lives have ended for whatever reason. Their story is shifting and they're coming to New York to be a part of its bigger story. Hold on to that. And I was like, okay. I don't know where my rug is, but I'm a part of a legacy. I'm a part of millions of people who are coming to this city for a new start. And that's really beautiful, I think. So I held very tightly to that idea.
That is gorgeous. Yeah. That, and that in itself is gorgeous. And it's kind of this bigger idea of like, boy, when we get zoomed in on something really small, how dangerous it is, like the rug being lost or whatever. And if you can get that perspective on what's the bigger story here and how is this playing into a bigger story, there's just such power in that every time. And that was a particularly poignant one your friend pulled out at an opportune moment. But that concept of sort of zooming out and getting a broader perspective, so powerful. Shauna, you talk in the book about 3 C words: courage, curiosity, and compassion, being your companions on this journey. And I think that collection of words is so good. Can you share a little bit about why those and how they play into this chapter for you?
Well, this journey started with curiosity, right? Like, what's next? Who am I? How do I do this? What does it mean to, like we were talking about, to be a learner? There was so much I needed to know and needed to unlearn and needed to relearn. But then the deeper side of curiosity, I picture it sort of swirling down. If you really want to be curious, underneath, you have to be self-compassionate. You don't get to be curious if you're an expert who has to do things. This comes back a little bit to the present over perfect idea. If you have to do it perfect all the time, you're going to miss some really important things. If you know the answers all the time, you don't get the benefit of curiosity. But if you flip it, if you start at the bottom with a practice of self-compassion, a practice that says you don't have to know, you deserve kindness and rest and grace and peace, even if you don't get everything right. So it started with curiosity, and then it moved into a deeper practice of self-compassion. And when you're practicing compassion and self-compassion are sort of like twin sisters that are always kind of switching off, carrying the heavier load. You can't practice one without the other. Mm-hmm. You can't be a compassionate person without being self-compassionate. When you practice self-compassion, when you practice tending to yourself well, it's a natural outflow into how you treat the people around you. And then for me, to be honest, courage was the last piece to sort of click into place. It was the last puzzle piece. I have been, in some ways, a brave person throughout my life in varying ways. But the last couple of years sort of kind of leveled a lot of things in my life. And one of them was I lost my bravery for a little while. I became a person whose greatest need was comfort, safety, feeling protected. And that's what happens sometimes when you go through a really difficult time, but it can't be how you live all the time. And I knew that about myself. Yeah. I knew that I had retreated pretty far. I knew that it was okay for a while, but especially I had a couple good friends in my life who sort of like, it's like I picture myself like surrounded, wrapped in like a million blankets in like the coziest world ever. And they like knock on the door and they crack the door. They're like, this is lovely. You can't live here forever. You have to come outside.
Yeah.
You have to get back into the world. You have to start recovering a sense of courage. And so, especially when you read the book chronologically, you can see there's that initial need for comfort and safety. And then toward the book, you can even feel the pacing. Toward the end of the book, the pacing picks up. And I use the phrase next self quite often through the last several chapters. And it's this idea of having recovered my own sense of bravery and being able to walk forward into a future that at the beginning of the book, I couldn't even imagine.
Yes. Oh, and that I can't say that I would have noticed the use of next self, although now I want to go back and reread those chapters. But I think the concept of I can't go back, right? There is no back. There's no, when we go through one of these hard chapters, there's no going back to whatever was before. And so, it feels like the lessons of the book are the sooner we accept that and acknowledge that we're in uncharted territory. And this is all new learning. And whatever the playbook was that got us here is probably not going to get us there. And there might not even be somebody who has the playbook, right? So the new collection of lessons can be exhilarating. It can be refreshing. Once you come out of the cocoon of the blankets and the comfort, there's something exhilarating about learning something new, right? Like, new adventures, new things exist here, but kind of from this new self, from this new person who's emerging, who now has this past in her collective experience. I think it's a really important fulcrum. The book doesn't have a plot per se; it's your story, but there's a fulcrum that seems like it tips at about that point where you're like reemerging into the world, but from a new place.
And just from a creative standpoint, one of the things that I think people are sometimes interested in is the book is not totally written chronologically. There are a lot of essays that are written and then mismatched all the way. And then there's an editor named Angela who I've worked with on all of my books. She was my original editor. Now she's freelances. And so I hire her for every single book. And she's the one who can tell where that fulcrum point is in the narrative. And so I can tell you exactly where it is. And she told me, she identified it for me. She's like, it's at the end of the cold moon chapter. That's the hinge point of the whole book. And so all these things had to happen before, and these things need to happen after. And in this sort of funny, because I was so behind on the deadline and because I was living so real time, we got to the point where the whole book was done, except there were 2 or 3 spaces right before the last chapters. And it was literally like, I think I haven't lived them yet. I think I haven't found words for them yet. There's some space, like I need to travel a little further as a human to live a little bit of this story. And I've never done it that way before in a book. It's always been like much more in the rear view. So there's a chapter, I believe it's called Next Self. And I wrote it like at 9 p.m. on a Thursday night and sent it in. And it was the last puzzle piece. And the book, it was out of my hands by Friday morning. I've never done something so last minute, but that's how this book felt. It felt like it was very much, I was kind of along for the ride and living it concurrently.
Yes. What a fascinating peek into the process. Thank you for sharing that, because I think, again, as a reader, right, you don't have the sense of how does this get constructed. And the fact that someone else can look at all these stories and see with their perspective, like there's a before and after here, and also that you could leave space for things to weave themselves in, is a really great metaphor for life. Sometimes we're trying to keep things very neat and tidy, and we just haven't had the experience yet that's going to unlock that particular piece of our story. And I think that's a great place for us to wrap the conversation. Like what a beautiful reminder that if we're looking for that in our own life, we just might have to wait a minute for that piece of the story to unfold.
Well, and I think even just to be honest, there were a couple times where she asked me, can you write an essay about this? Or can you touch more on this? And I had to say, honestly, no, because I haven't been able to do that yet. And so I think that we when we're talking not about a book, but about our own stories, what are the skills we need to develop? What are the experiences we need to have? What are the moments of forgiveness or acceptance or bravery that we need to practice in order to move our stories a little further down the sidewalk?
Yeah. That's gorgeous. So wonderful to have you with us. And I hope everyone listening finds one or more of these books that they can treasure as much as I have. It was a delight to meet you.
Thank you. You as well. Have a great day.
All right, my friends. I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I enjoyed having it. Shauna is such a treat. I am going to make sure that you have the links I promised to a number of her books. And we had a follow-up conversation after this interview with a group of clients who were asking, if I'm not familiar with Shauna's work, where would be a good starting point? And we sort of agreed, those of us who have read her work, that the book Present Over Perfect might be an excellent starting point if you are in that chapter of life where you are really trying to find those pockets of peace, those moments where you can drop in and fully experience the moment and not just sort of, surf across the surface of all of them. And obviously her most recent book, I guess I haven't learned that yet, is an exceptional piece of writing if you are going through a hard time. And I would say so is her book, Bittersweet. All of those would be top recos. And there's not one that I would not recommend in her collection. So please enjoy. If you are new to the Brilliant Balance community, please come join us in our Brilliant Balance Facebook group. Just search groups, find Brilliant Balance. We will welcome you into that community, and also follow along on Instagram. Shauna said that's her favorite platform. I think it's quickly becoming mine. So you can follow me at @CSchoolNikki, and I would love to hear from you on that platform. That's all for today, my friends. Till next time, let's be brilliant.